ठीक है, अपनी आपस में। बाकी तो आपकी CNS के भी चल ही रही है। CNS का एक पार्ट है हाइपोथैलेमस, लास्ट। इसके ऊपर 110% यू विल गेट अ लॉन्ग क्वेश्चन रिलेटेड टू हाइपोथैलेमस, पैपेज सर्किट एंड एक्सटेंडेड पैपेज सर्किट। 3 क्वेश्चंस इसमें से पक्के हैं, ठीक है। एक आता है हाइपोथैलेमस, दैट इज अ लॉन्ग क्वेश्चन। प्लीज रिमूव योर बैग फ्रॉम योर फ्रंट। यहाँ से हटा दीजिए आगे। क्वेश्चन, क्या सारा डिस्कशन आज ही होगा? Shall we start? Shall we start? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. So in physiology, you get a definite question on functions of hypothalamus. Okay. Enumerate the various functions performed by hypothalamus, or it might be write a short note on hypothalamus, or the question may be short note on passage circuit, okay, or it may come as a question on memory and emotions. Yeah, but definitely you are going to get a question on this particular topic, hypothalamus, okay. और hypothalamus के ही 9 या 10 फंक्शन है। 9-10 फंक्शन को आपको एनलिस्ट करना है और उसको एन्यूमरेट करना है। So please listen to these words, whether it is asking the enlist, enumerate, short note, very short note. Yeah? When we are talking of hypothalamus, from the physiological point of view, the hypothalamus is divided into anterior part, intermediate part and posterior part. When we are talking of anterior part of the hypothalamus, it has 5 nucleus present in it. When we are talking of the intermediate area of the hypothalamus, it has 4 nucleus present in it. When we are talking of the posterior hypothalamus, it particularly has a 2 nucleus. Okay, all these nucleus, okay, they are responsible for number of functions. Here, the name of the nucleus they are given in your book, but for a fast video, if we are talking of the anterior hypothalamic area, it is preoptic area, supraoptic, suprachiasmatic nucleus and arcuate nucleus. Okay. Come first. Posterior hypothalamic nucleus, they have broadly mammillary body and posterior nucleus. Rest of the nucleus of the hypothalamus, they lie into the intermediate area. Here, depending on the nucleus, the hypothalamus performs various functions. Now, what are the functions performed by the hypothalamus? What is the most important function that can be written as it is the first important function performed by hypothalamus? The first important function of hypothalamus is maintenance of internal environment with the help of temperature regulation. The first function is maintenance of internal environment, and most priority comes the maintenance of temperature regulation. For this temperature regulation, as we have already done in the temperature regulation mechanism class, anterior and posterior nucleus. If there is rise in the increase in the body temperature, which nucleus will get stimulated? Anterior nucleus. So the anterior nucleus is responsible for heat dissipation mechanism or heat loss mechanism. So if there is a lesion in the anterior nucleus that it does not get stimulated, what will be the applied effect? Hyperthermia. Here, First, the hypothalamus itself we divide it into three broad regions. When we are talking physiologically or functionally, the anterior nucleus, it has 4 or 5 nucleus. Okay. Now, the temperature regulatory mechanism, which is one of the important function of homeostasis. When we are talking of temperature regulatory mechanism, if the core body temperature increases, that is, the body has to lose heat. For losing heat mechanism, which nucleus has to be stimulated? It is the anterior nucleus. And if there is a lesion or a problem in anterior nucleus, it will definitely not get stimulated. What it will result into? It will result into hyperthermia. The posterior nucleus is responsible for what? For decrease in the body's temperature mechanism. So, if there is a lesion in the posterior nucleus, what will happen? Hypothermia. That is for heat gain mechanism. Posterior nucleus is responsible for heat gain mechanism, thermogenesis. So, if there is a lesion or a problem or abrasion, then what it will result into? Hypothermia. Hyperthermia and hypothermia. So, this is the first important function of hypothalamus. So, you need not to write that it is responsible for temperature regulation. That is not sufficient. You have to explain the point. Okay, that temperature regulation, ideal body temperature is this. If there is variation, that is in hot environment or in cold environment, what will happen? And if there is a lesion or a problem, that may result into hypo or hyperthermia. This is for easy classification of the nucleus and their regions. Okay, these are the regions, these are the nucleus, and they are responsible for various functions. We will be coming directly to the functions. Before coming to the functions, we are talking about the afferent and the efferent. Some information has to come to the hypothalamus, then only it is going to give command or process the functioning. Okay, so all the afferent information, they are coming through different areas from the hypothalamus, neocortex, limbic system, visual input, visual centers, and ascending somatic sensory pathways. They are all giving the information. What do you mean by the limbic system? Is limbic system a separate anatomical structure? It is not a separate anatomical structure, okay? It is comprising of the various structures which are present in the brain, and it forms a limbic system. The limbus word in Latin means border or ring. Okay? It means border or ring. So the cerebral cortex structure, cingulate gyrus, okay, and other associated areas like hypothalamus, hippocampus, okay, anterior nucleus of thalamus, some part of the basal ganglia, they all form a C-shaped structure, and that C-shaped structure or the borders, okay, they form the limbic system. The limbic system as such is not a separate anatomical structure, but it is comprised of different structures which are present in the brain itself, and they form a ring or a border. So this word comes from the Latin word that is limbus. Limbus means border. So the structures which are present at the border, they form the limbic system. So the afferent information, they are coming from the various sources. Okay. So if it is coming from the hypothalamus, receives visceral, including taste through the spinal cord and brainstem. Okay. Afferent from NTS to the hypothalamus carry taste sensations. Somatic afferents, okay, they carry other different sensations. So these are the different structures. Limbic system carries another information that is responsible for memory, emotion, and behavior. Here, the afferent information कहाँ से आ रही है? जब information हमें पता चलेगा hypothalamus से, then only it is going to react or respond. So the information they are coming from this. So if short note comes on only hypothalamus, the question may come enlist and enumerate the functions of hypothalamus. It may come short note on hypothalamus. If it is coming on hypothalamus, then you have to divide the short note into the different regions of hypothalamus, different nucleus of the hypothalamus, okay, the connections, the afferent connections and the efferent connections, and then you have to write down about the functions of hypothalamus. Question. Please read the questions carefully. What we are asking. Okay, these are the names of the different connections of the fibers. The hypothalamus receives fiber from the cortex of the frontal lobe. Okay, efferent connections. They fibers to the autonomic center in brain and spinal cord. Whatever the information which is coming to the hypothalamus, okay, it is getting processed. The various nucleus are responsible for their actions, okay, and accordingly the actions will be taken. So these actions are taken through with the help of brainstem and the spinal cord. These are the efferent connections. जैसे efferent है वैसे efferent connections going to the neocortex, going to the thalamus, especially from mammillary body. Clear? इसको क्यों special emphasize किया ये अपन पैसिव सर्किट में देखेंगे, but it is specially emphasized that this is getting connected to the mammillary bodies, limbic system, hippocampus, septal nuclei, amygdaloid complex. Okay, these are the different efferent connections. Most fibers are unminded, connected to most part of the limbic system. Limbic system ही पैसिव सर्किट बनाता है और आगे फॉर्मेशन होती है इसकी. अब अपन आते हैं इसके फंक्शंस पे. जब अपन इसके फंक्शन की बात करते हैं तो इसका एक फंक्शन क्या है, इसको कंट्रोल कर रहा है एंडोक्राइन को भी ये कंट्रोल कर रहा है. इट इज मास्टर ग्लैंड. हाइपोथैलेमस इज मास्टर ग्लैंड. ओके, इसको ऑटोनॉमिक नर्वस सिस्टम का भी मास्टर बोलते हैं क्योंकि ये ऑटोनॉमिक नर्वस सिस्टम को भी कंट्रोल करता है. ये अपन देखेंगे, पर अभी फर्स्ट पॉइंट जो हम देख रहे हैं कि ये कैसे एंडोक्राइन को कंट्रोल करता है. तो एंडोक्राइन को कैसे करता है, हाइपोथैलेमस, हाइपोफिजियस, ओके, पिट्यूटरी एक्सिस. ओके, when we are talking of the pituitary gland, okay, it is divided into anterior and posterior. When we are talking of posterior, we are again very much aware that it is responsible for two particular hormones, that is oxytocin and ADH. Yes, but these particular oxytocin and ADH, they are getting formed, okay, in the hypothalamus. Then they are getting secreted through the axonal fibers, coming and getting accumulated in the posterior pituitary, and when there is requirement, they are getting released. Whereas when we are talking of the anterior pituitary hormones, they are coming through the portal circulation or through the blood. Whereas the posterior, they are coming through the axonal fibers or the neurons. Whereas the anterior, when we are talking, they are coming through the portal circulation of blood. Clear? Supraoptic and paraventricular nucleus, ये दो न्यूक्लियस रिस्पॉन्सिबल हैं किसके लिए, posterior pituitary hormone रिलीज करने के लिए. ठीक है. हाइपोथैलेमिक हाइपोफिजियल पोर्टल सिस्टम रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर secretions of anterior pituitary hormone. कंट्रोल ऑफ एडिनोफाइब्रोसिस. अब इसको इतना डिटेल में है कि अपन एक क्लास के अंदर इसको कवर नहीं करेंगे, बट ब्रॉडली व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू से इज सुप्राऑप्टिक एंड पैरावेंट्रिकुलर. ठीक है. सुप्रावेंट्रिकुलर किसके लिए रिस्पॉन्सिबल होती है, एडीएच के लिए. पैरावेंट्रिकुलर रिस्पॉन्सिबल होती है ऑक्सीटोसिन. ये दोनों रिस्पॉन्सिबल है अलग अलग हार्मोन के लिए, और ये किसको कंट्रोल कर रहा है, पोस्टीरियर पिट्यूटरी को कंट्रोल कर रहा है. पोस्टीरियर पिट्यूटरी इन दो हार्मोन्स को रिलीज कर. ठीक है. और एंटीरियर पिट्यूटरी कौन कौन सा हार्मोन रिलीज कर रही है, सम हार्मोन्स दे आर गेटिंग स्टिमुलेटरी इफेक्ट, सम हार्मोन्स आर inhibitory in action. So if your question comes of 10 marks, kindly make a short table, write down the hormones secreted from anterior pituitary, their name and their effects, whether they are stimulating or whether they are inhibiting. Okay, 7 name of the 7 hormones and their effects. 2 hormones of posterior pituitary and their effects. The most common question asked in your viva and in your paper. Here, Now, control secrete. This is the hormones which are getting released and getting secreted from medial paraventricular nucleus. Para, okay? Remember, para responsible for anterior pituitary hormone. Oxytocin is paraventricular, vasopressin और ADH through supraoptic nucleus. अगर इसके अंदर लीजन होगा तो क्या होगा? What will happen? Which type of condition will be seen? Name of the condition or the disease? Diabetes insipidus. Okay, so you have to write down, if there will be a lesion, what will happen? It will result into diabetes insipidus, and all the syndromes which are attached, which are associated with diabetes insipidus. So it becomes syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone secretion, SIADH. तो कई बार शॉर्टकट आ जाता है SIADH, syndrome of inappropriate ADH secretion. समझ में आई? syndrome, number of symptoms are included in it. तो उस डायबिटीज इंसिपिडस के अंदर जो भी सिम्टम्स आ रहे हैं उनको एक पर्टिकुलर वर्ड दे दिया गया है, syndrome of inappropriate ADH secretion. वो किस वजह से होगा? when there will be a lesion or inefficient secretion of ADH, maybe supraoptic. Okay, control. Autonomic functions. How it is going to get affect autonomic nervous system? Through brainstem and spinal cord. ठीक है, कोई भी एक्टिविटी होती है तो उसके अंदर क्या रिएक्शन आता है? या तो सिंपैथेटिक आएगा या पैरासिम्पैथेटिक आएगा. इसके साथ में एसोसिएट हो जाएगा पेपिज सर्किट. पेपिज सर्किट इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर मेमोरी एंड इमोशन. इफ वी आर टॉकिंग ऑफ मेमोरी एंड इमोशन, ओके, the memory will be happy or it will be a bad memory or a sad memory. So depending on the emotions which you perceive and the emotions which affected you, first you have to perceive that particular emotion, then this emotion is going to affect you. Okay, so जब अपन emotions को perceive करते हैं वो कहलाएगा cognition. Then the second domain will come affective domain. So how that particular emotion or act affected. So all these will result into stimulation of whether there is stimulation of sympathetic or parasympathetic. और वो stimulation कैसे आएगा कि आपका वो action या memory that made you happy or unhappy. If that made you happy, the sympathetic stimulation will be there. If that made you unhappy, the parasympathetic stimulation will be here. So stimulation of superior anterior hypothalamic nucleus causes bladder contraction. Lateral area produces diffuse sympathetic discharge and adrenal medullary secretion. इसके अंदर क्या होगा? sympathetic stimulation के अंदर क्या क्या head to toe, what are the changes when there is sympathetic stimulation? If there is sympathetic stimulation, what will happen to the eyes? Then what are the next steps? What are the different systems which will get affected in the sympathetic nervous system stimulation? The salivary secretion will get affected definitely. Then next, heart rate. What will happen to heart rate? It will increase. Just the opposite in case of parasympathetic. What will happen to the digestive system? Inhibit that. About functions, temperature regulation, we have seen the functions, okay. regulate water intake. How it will regulate the water intake? What are the two mechanisms which are responsible for water intake? Lateral nucleus of hypothalamus is responsible for thirst. And another important factor which is responsible for water regulation is ADH. So which nucleus is responsible for? Supraoptic nucleus. Okay. So whenever there will be change in the osmolarity, it is getting affecting the lateral nucleus or the supraoptic nucleus. So accordingly, if there is increase in the osmolarity or decrease in the osmolarity, there will be the mechanism which will be responsible for whether increasing the thirst or decreasing the thirst. There will be loss of water or there will be conservation of water. So two nucleus which are responsible for water regulatory mechanisms are the lateral nucleus and supraoptic nucleus. Lateral nucleus is responsible for thirst, okay, and supraoptic nucleus it is responsible through the regulatory mechanism created or done by the ADH. And what is the function of ADH? It is antidiuretic hormone. What are the target area of nephron which is getting affected by ADH? Collecting duct and distal later part of the nephron, collecting duct and leaking. So these are the regions which are getting affected by ADH. Yeah. So hypothalamus का क्या function हो गया? Regulation of water intake. और दो तरह से हो रहा है, दो न्यूक्लियस रिस्पॉन्सिबल है, लेटरल न्यूक्लियस और supraoptic nucleus. Lateral nucleus directly it is concerned with this thirst center and how it is getting stimulated when there is change in the osmolarity. When it reaches to this particular nucleus, it is getting either stimulated or same is the picture seen in the supraoptic nucleus. But supraoptic nucleus का mechanism क्या है? Secretion of ADH. Yeah, inhibitory secretion of hypovolemia. Hypovolemia means osmolarity. Osmoreceptors getting activated. Where they are present? They are present in the hypothalamus. ADH release, renal water reabsorption. Moderate decrease in the volume, inhibition of baroreceptors, thirst, ADH secretion, angiotensin secretion, and finally the volume reabsorption. If you don't have that much time to cover the answer, you can give all the answers. Okay, if you have listened in a flow chart, don't write any story. Hypertonicity, hypovolemia, osmoreceptors. If it is hypertonicity, osmoreceptors is getting activated. Hypovolemia, baroreceptors are getting activated, and dryness of mouth, subchronical organs, oral intake of water is increased. Regulation of food intake. Lateral hypothalamic nucleus is responsible for hunger center or feeding center. Lesion causes anorexia. Okay, ventromedial nucleus responsible for satiety center. If this is getting inhibited, okay, inhibit feeding center, lesion causes hypothalamic obesity. Obesity तो हो सकती है, बस किस वजह से हो रही है? Lesion of the hypothalamic nucleus. So the name given is hypothalamic obesity. This is ventromedial nucleus. So lateral nucleus किसके लिए responsible हो गया? Thirst और hunger. Thirst and hunger. Ventromedial nucleus for satiety center. Satiety center का क्या mechanism रहता है? How it gets stimulated that the person is satisfied with the meal. As there is increase in the concentration of glucose after having a meal, okay, so there comes the role of insulin, okay, and that gives this information to the ventromedial nucleus to have the feeling of satiety. So what happens in diabetic patients? They continuously and they very frequently feel hungry because the satiety center is not getting the information of stimulation that the person is satisfied. तो इसके अंदर किसका रोल हो गया? ग्लूकोज, ग्लूकोज के साथ में किसका रोल आ गया? इंसुलिन का, इंसुलिन का रोल आते ही ये पॉलीफेजिया देखा जाता है ना डायबिटिक पेशेंट्स में, तो वो उसका मैकेनिज्म क्या होता है, क्यों बोला जाता है? कई चीजें होती है कि आपको अपनी रीजनिंग करनी है, वाइवा में डायरेक्ट पूछा जाता है व्हाई वी आस्क डायबिटिक पेशेंट टू हैव अ वॉक। देखते हैं अपन ये सब चीजें रेगुलर है, पर कभी उसको क्रिटिकली एनालाइज नहीं करते कि इसका मैकेनिज्म क्या है। What we do is we just go and read the notes that will come as questions and complete our task. आ जाओ आप चारों के चारों, सेकंड लास्ट रो उधर से। एक दूसरे के फेस मत देखो, खड़े होके आगे आ जाओ। आपकी इंटेलिजेंस बहुत अच्छी है, आ जाओ आगे बस, आ जाओ। 1 2 3 4 5 आ जाओ। कैरी योर बैग, कैरी योर मोबाइल, आ जाओ। सबसे आगे जाके बैठो। इधर आ जाओ। क्या होता है ओबेसिटी? What do you mean by obesity? How will you define obesity? ऐसे सर्च खाने से पास हो जाओगे, निकल जाओगे? ये तो तुम एक्टिंग करती है आपकी क्लास में। When we are talking of obesity, hunger, okay, you might have studied in biochemistry about the different chemicals, okay, orexin, ghrelin, leptin, okay. Very rare conditions, but they may be asked in physiology also. Write a note on leptin or ghrelin or orexin, okay. What are the different chemicals which will be responsible for hunger or satiety? So just read through it, very rare, and you might get the question, okay. Now we proceed for the next function of hypothalamus, because we have to complete the limbic system also. Okay, increased food intake is caused by neuropeptide Y produced there in the arcuate nucleus. So arcuate nucleus is also responsible for this mechanism. Arcuate nucleus का 2 डिविजन हो जाता है, और वो पर्टिकुलरली एक तो रिलीज करेगा ऐसा MSH मेलेटोनिन सिंथेटिक हार्मोन, ठीक है, और दूसरा एक पर्टिकुलर हार्मोन सिक्रीट करता है, तो दोनों फूड इंटेक को रेगुलेट करते हैं। एक कौन सा कर रहा था आपका वेंट्रोमीडियल, एक था लेटरल। लेटरल किसके लिए? हंगर के लिए रिस्पॉन्सिबल था। अलॉन्ग विथ लेटरल न्यूक्लियस विथ अनदर न्यूक्लियस इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल इज द arcuate nucleus. So when you are writing an answer in your exam, okay, it is not acceptable from you to write a simple sentence that hypothalamus regulates hunger. But how and which nucleus regulates? You have to see, mention the name of the nucleus or the region which is responsible for hunger or satiety or whatever the functions it is. Okay, orexin A and B, ghrelin, melanin concentrating hormone, activity related peptide, ghrelin, and gonadotropin releasing hormone. Decreased food intake is amphetamine, okay, CRAH, estrogen, dopamine, alpha-adrenaline. So these are the various hormones and chemicals which are responsible for decrease or increase in the food intake. Now comes another section. these are the chemicals. Glucose determines the activity of satiety center. Low glucose in blood decreases the activity of satiety center, so feeding center is less inhibited and feeling of hunger occurs. High blood glucose increases activity of satiety center, so feeding center is inhibited. So these are the mechanisms of how both the centers are getting inhibited. Personal factors, habit, preference, body weight, status of the subject, environment. Glucostatic hypothesis और ये सब ये आता है most important Pappes circuit. So you get a note on Pappes circuit. So what is Pappes circuit? Pappes circuit includes important structures which are present in the limbic system. इसमें 3 important structures हैं जिसको कि हमें याद करना है. उसमें से सबसे important जो आता है वो है hypothalamus. Hypothalamus इसलिए important है क्योंकि जितनी भी information है, sensory information, they are coming through hypothalamus. और जितनी भी output हो रहा है वो भी hypothalamus से हो रहा है. तो इसको अपन ने क्या बोल दिया? सर्किट. हाइपोथैलेमस से स्टार्ट हो रहा है और हाइपोथैलेमस से फिनिश हो रहा है. हाइपोथैलेमस से जितनी भी इंफॉर्मेशन है दे विल बी कैरिड एंड दे विल बी ट्रांसमिटेड देयर टू द एंटीरियर न्यूक्लियस ऑफ थैलेमस. एंटीरियर न्यूक्लियस ऑफ थैलेमस इज अ पार्ट ऑफ लिम्बिक सिस्टम. और ये किसके थ्रू जाएगा? थ्रू मैमिलरी फाइबर, थैलेमिक मैमिलरी फाइबर. इसके थ्रू कनेक्शन हो रहा है हाइपोथैलेमस और थैलेमस. Here, then this information is going to the cingulate gyrus. It is another important structure which is present in the limbic system. Cingulate gyrus is not only receiving information from the hypothalamus, but it is also receiving information from the frontal lobe. So associated areas भी अपनी information किसको दे रहे हैं? Cingulate gyrus. ठीक है. फिर सिंगुलेट गायरस, ठीक है, हिप्पोकैम्पस फॉर्मेशन का एक स्ट्रक्चर है जो कि हिप्पोकैम्पस और डेंटेड गायरस से मिलके बना है. क्या हुआ? क्लास के बाहर जाना है? So there is difference between hippocampus and hippocampus formation. What are the two structures which are responsible for hippocampus formation? Is hippocampus and the dentate gyrus. They will be getting information. कहाँ से मिलेगी इनको information? Through the cingulate gyrus. And from hippocampus, the output information is coming to the hypothalamus. That forms the Pappes circuit. अब एक दूसरा सर्किट होता है जिसका नाम है extended Pappes circuit. ठीक है, एक हो गया पैपेज सर्किट. उसके क्या कंपोनेंट हो गए इंपॉर्टेंट? हाइपोथैलेमस, एंटीरियर न्यूक्लियस ऑफ थैलेमस, सिंगुलेट गायरस, हिप्पोकैम्पस एंड फाइनली इनटू द हाइपोथैलेमस. Another term which we are using is extended Pappes circuit. So extended Pappes circuit is when you are including amygdala with it. हमने क्या ऐड किया? एमिगडाला का दूसरा नाम क्या है? अनेस्थिका खत्म हो गया ना आपका? हाँ, मतलब ये अदर नेम. होता है क्या ऐसा कोई दूसरा नाम? क्या हो सकता है? It is acting as emotional brain. Hippocampus is responsible for your memory. Okay, and this amygdala is responsible for acting as emotional brain. Okay, and when this is acting, जैसे बताया था पहले क्या होता है? इमोशन का परसीव करता है, कॉग्निशन होता है, फिर उस इमोशन आपके हैप्पी, सैड, जो भी है वो आपको अफेक्ट करेगा। देन अफेक्टिव डोमेन, so when you are involving amygdala with the passive, original passive circuit, then it becomes extended passive circuit. So you get two things, that is passive circuit and extended passive circuit. Definitely getting a short note in your exam, whether pre-university or university, this will be there. या फिर आपका MCQ में भी आ सकता है और किसी भी तरह से आ सकता है. So control of emotions, feeling, expression via limbic system, memory body, anterior thalamic nucleus, cingulate gyrus, hippocampus, and again the hypothalamus. Emotions, cerebral cortex, limbic system, hypothalamus, or ventromedial nucleus. Okay. Now, what are the functions of limbic system? It is mainly responsible for olfactory. Okay. Secondly, it is responsible for memory. Third, it is responsible for emotions. What are the different emotions that can be seen depending on the visualization? Okay. Okay, whatever the visualization is there, accordingly it will be changed in the emotions. Rage, क्या होता है rage? Daily we encounter with this word road rage. Okay, so what do you mean by rage? It is a feeling of aggression. It is a feeling of aggression. Okay, if there is a lesion in the limbic system, in animals it has been seen, a word which is used is sham rage. So what's the difference between rage and sham rage? In case of sham rage, there is no expression of emotion. It is only the aggressive nature. So rage and sham rage. Sham rage seen in animals after what? After having the lesion in the limbic system. So it results in the rage or the aggressive behavior. Clear? And what are the other emotions? Emotions which are getting formed by the memory. उनके दो डोमेन हो जाते हैं, एक हो जाता है मेंटल, एक हो जाता है फिजिकल. जब अपन मेंटल इमोशंस की बात करते हैं तो मेंटल इमोशंस के अंदर अपन फर्स्ट करते हैं कॉग्निशन, सेकंड करते हैं अफेक्टिव. व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग ऑफ द फिजिकल, फिजिकल के अंदर हम दो तरह से उसको परसीव करते हैं. एक होता है थ्रू द एक्सप्रेशन वाया द सिंपैथेटिक और पैरासिम्पैथेटिक नर्वस सिस्टम और ऑटोनॉमिक नर्वस सिस्टम, और दूसरा होता है सोमैटिक नर्वस सिस्टम के थ्रू उसका एक्सप्रेशन. सोमैटिक नर्वस सिस्टम के केस में ये होता है कि अगर जो इंसिडेंट है वो हैप्पी है, ठीक है, दैट इज गिविंग यू अ फीलिंग ऑफ गुडनेस और हैप्पीनेस, so person will tend to move towards that particular incident or the scene or the person. और अगर अनहैप्पी है तो वो क्या करेगा, उससे अगेंस्ट जाने की कोशिश करेगा. In both the situation, what is happening is there is involvement of the skeletal muscle and the somatic nervous system. So physical domain in case of this, okay, emotions is divided into two domain, autonomic nervous system and somatic nervous system. When we are talking of somatic nervous system, it is the sympathetic and parasympathetic. If the person is perceiving happy or good information, then the sympathetic nervous system gets activated. If it is bad or unhappy, then the parasympathetic nervous system is okay. ठीक है. Emotions क्या होते हैं? How do you express emotion or define emotion? It is the intense feeling of expression, whether there is happiness or sadness. Now comes the circadian function. What is circadian rhythm? It is the biological clock. और biological clock में क्या क्या include होगा? It is a regular change in the concentration of hormones or change in the body temperature. Okay, पर्टिकुलर फ्रीक्वेंसी या ड्यूरेशन के बाद, जैसे अर्ली मॉर्निंग के अंदर आपका टेम्परेचर कम है, अर्ली मॉर्निंग के अंदर इसीलिए इसका सिक्रीशन कम है ना। तो ये पर्टिकुलर ड्यूरेशन, पर्टिकुलर टाइम पे फ्रीक्वेंसी या टेम्परेचर जो है वो चेंज हो रहा है, एंड दैट circadian rhythm comprises of 24 hours. So continuous in 24 hour cycle there is change in the pattern of the flow or the different parameters. So that becomes the circadian rhythm. Okay. About a day, rhythmic fluctuation is physiological parameters of the body. 24-hour cycle parameters include ACTH, melatonin, body temperature, sleep-wake cycle, gonadotropin. Now, what do you mean by sleep-wake cycle? हाइपोथैलेमस के अंदर सुप्राक्यास्मेटिक न्यूक्लियस होता है, ठीक है। सुप्राक्यास्मेटिक न्यूक्लियस इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर वेक स्लीप साइकिल, ठीक है। कैसे? थ्रू द रेटाइनल हाइपोफिजियल ट्रैक्ट। रेटाइना किसके लिए रिस्पॉन्सिबल है? विजन के लिए। कब स्टिमुलेट होते हैं रिसेप्टर? ड्यूरिंग नाइट। तो स्लीप वेक साइकिल का जो पूरा फ्लो चार्ट है ना, जैसे लाइट के कारण रेटाइनल हाइपोफिजियल ट्रैक्ट स्टिमुलेट होता है ना, तो मेलेटोनिन सीक्रेटिंग हार्मोन का इनहिबिशन करते हैं। जहाँ लाइट ऑफ हुई वहाँ पे मेलेटोनिन सीक्रेटिंग हार्मोन जो है वो स्टिमुलेट हो जाता है। दिस क्रिएट्स अ स्लीप वेक साइकिल। और इसके अंदर किसका इन्वॉल्वमेंट हो रहा है? ऑप्टिक, रेटाइना, okay, through which nucleus? Suprachiasmatic nucleus. Suprachiasmatic nucleus is responsible for circadian rhythm or the biological clock, and especially when we are talking of the sleep-wake cycle, it is affecting through the retinal hypophyseal tract, and retina is perceived or it's getting stimulated by light. तो रात में अगर आप मोबाइल यूज करते हो तो आपकी लाइट क्या कर रही है? आपकी स्लीप साइकिल को डिस्टर्ब कर, सो योर बायोलॉजिकल क्लॉक इज गेटिंग डिस्टर्ब, है ना। सब लाइट ऑफ है पर मोबाइल की लाइट आपकी रेटाइना तक तो पहुंच ही रही है, आप मोबाइल यूज कर रहे हैं। एक सिंपल एग्जांपल है, इस तरह से आपकी बायोलॉजिकल क्लॉक internally driven external factor influences the rhythm. Suprachiasmatic nucleus is responsible. Afferent signals reach via retina, hypothalamic fibers. Rhythm is disturbed during the high speed jet travel. Jet lag पता है? Jet lag most of you might be familiar. Okay, so very rare. Stress internal factor हो गया, external factor cerebral cortex limbic system को stimulate करेगा, affect करेगा, और आपकी biological clock से hormones का secretion is getting clear. So this is excessive secretion of ADH from posterior pituitary. These are the causes and these are the symptoms.